It's like some guys will just never admit when they need help. I guess Jimmy's dad didn't teach him how to change a tire. Or maybe he did and the dude just didn't listen hard enough or didn't retain the information. All I know is that when our tire popped and Jim had to steer our car to the side of the highway, we were stuck there for around 30 minutes. He got it done, but it took him a long time. Too long. The road was empty, deserted. We hadn't seen a single other vehicle or living soul in a while, and that wasn't surprising. It is a little-used state highway that connects Union Quarry to the main thruway, which continues east back towards Dowley, back to mine and Jim's home. My mom and stepdad live in Union Quarry, though, so I use it quite a bit, and by default, because he's my husband, Jim uses it too. The fat moon was hanging low and bright in the deep violet night sky, dangling over the tall pines that were rearing up on both sides of the road. Despite the heat of the early summer, a gentle evening damp had pressed down, settling over the ground. The sounds of crickets and buzzing insects filled the air. Jim was driving that night. I had the passenger window rolled down and was letting my hand dangle out, feeling the wind rushing by. Jim is a huge fan of classic country, so some old man's voice was coming through the stereo, crooning out words in a ridiculous southern accent, banjos and guitars accompanying the sounds of his song. Jim was tapping his hands on the steering wheel along with it, adding his own voice to the harmony. We had just reached the crest of a long hill, the part where the road finally straightens out, when the left side of the car began to dip, began to shake, followed quickly by a terrible metallic grating sound. The steering wheel started shaking in Jim's hands. Instinctively, I covered my stomach and braced myself, but Jimmy managed to keep the steering wheel steady, slow the car down, and pull us over to the gravel shoulder, the wheels crunching under the rocks. Our vehicle came to a rest at a slight angle, so the headlights were beaming into the woods. When I stepped out of the car, I looked down the road, which was dark, empty, and seemingly endless, and then I looked into the forest. Distantly, far away, among the shadowed trees, there were two dim, reflective white lights high in the branches, barely visible, barely discernible. But they were, level, right next to each other. I didn't think too much about them, but I did notice them. I remember noticing them. Jim pulled out the keys, keeping the headlights of the vehicle on. He got out of the car, flicked on his phone's flashlight, and leaned down over the rear driver's side tire. "Oh, shit." He shook his head. "We popped a flat." I nodded. I figured." I crossed over to where he was inspecting the tire. "That was some smooth driving there, Tex. Did you learn that at the academy?" He chuckled and looked up at me. "I don't think there was a unit on flat tires." "Well, if you pop one during a shift, you're ready for it," I said. He offered me a faux proud smirk. Yeah, sure. Washington's finest." I watched him inspect the flat tire. He shook his head, ran a hand through his short black hair, and grunted, clearly annoyed. Me, though, I was not going to let this dampen my mood. I had just had an amazing night. Jim and I had visited my mom and stepdad in Union Quarry to tell them that we were expecting. Of course, at that point, I wasn't showing, but the look on my mom's face, the love and joy in her eyes, it had filled me with a calm warmth. That night, even on the side of a deserted highway, even standing beside our inoperable vehicle, I was content. The evening July air was full of promise. The future was stretching before me like the dark weaving highway. What was next for us? What is next for us? I hope our life together will be as endless as that quiet road. Jim pushed himself up and then turned around to face me. Are you all right? He asked. Based on the gentle caress of the words and the softness behind his eyes, I knew he wasn't just talking to me. I'll be fine, but the quicker you fix this flat, the more fine I'll be. And, to his credit, Jim didn't hesitate. He nodded with confidence and pointed towards the trunk. Yeah, on it. I let him get to work. I strolled to the front of the vehicle and crossed back to the passenger side, which was nearer to the endless line of trees that pressed impossibly close to the highway. I leaned back against the car and stared into them, trying to suppress my desire for a cigarette. I remember thinking that the woods were approaching somehow, inching forwards. Obviously, they weren't, but that was what it felt like. We were surrounded by tall, black trees, and our only means of leaving was currently under repair. I saw those dim lights again. They were far up in the trees, far away, just a suggestion in the deep woods, but maybe a little bit more of a suggestion, a little bit clearer than they had been the first time I had seen them. I took a step closer, as if that would help me make out what they were. Obviously, I still couldn't tell. They were so far away that a single step wasn't going to help me. All right, I need a jack. Jim's voice drifted to me from the back of the car. A jack and a spare. And yes, of course, I need this wrench thing. I turned around and smirked at him. Need any help? Me? Nah, I got this. He stood up, smiling at me over the top of the car. It was a confident, self-assured grin. He was holding the jack in one hand and he lifted it up to show me. Don't you worry your pretty little head for a single second. I got this, babe. You sure? 100%. 100%. Wow. Oh, okay, well, let me know if you change your mind then. I won't, but I will, he said. Jim has always been like that. Confident. Almost too confident. Going through school, he was one of the popular kids, with his easy smile, his handsome face, his ridiculously good hand-eye coordination. I was a little bit of an outcast, watching him from a distance. By the time we started dating, I knew him way more than he knew me. And one of the things that I knew, that I had noticed over the years, and that I still know, is that every shift of his face is carefully calculated to exude certainty. Infinite certainty, as though he has never been wrong and he never will be. I wonder how being a dad is going to change that. Knowing Jimmy, I don't think it'll change much. There was a gentle, warm gust, the brush of a ghost's lips on the nape of my neck. I shivered and turned back around to see if the lights in the trees had shifted or changed. They had. They were closer, clearer. Two small, circular, glinting, reflective lights in the darkness, still high in the trees. As I watched them, observed them, they didn't move. Standing there, with my back to the car, staring into those trees, I managed to convince myself that my eyes were playing tricks on me. That those lights weren't moving, weren't approaching. I didn't like it, though. I didn't like the goosebumps that spread over my skin. I didn't like the strange uneasiness that settled in my gut. I walked back to the other side of the car, to the flat tire. Jim had lifted the vehicle into the air with the jack and was working on torquing the lug nuts. The car was shaking with his effort, and he was letting out little grunts with every pull of the wrench. The spare was laying next to Jimmy, flat on the ground. I think you're supposed to loosen them before you lift the vehicle off the road. I'm using a different method, he said. He pulled the wrench. It's better. I promise. It's faster. All right. Well, if you say so. I knew that he was lying to me. When we had first started dating, that would have annoyed me. At that point, though, I knew him too well. That wasn't Jim lying. That was just a little Jimmyism. Everyone knows them. His brothers, his sister, his mom, his dad, his best buds. They all have stories about little Jimmyisms. Lies that he says with such confidence that you don't have the heart to correct him. I reached down and ran a hand over my flat stomach. On that lonely roadside, under the distant, uncaring moon, I wondered if our child was going to be like that. Like their dad, with Jimmyisms, or would they be like me? A quiet, shy, reserved kid, someone who lacked confidence in everything they did, including being a mother-to-be. I considered getting back into the car and then thought better of it. It was currently raised above the ground, being suspended on a tiny jack. If I got into the car, the whole apparatus could collapse, and we would have to call for some roadside assistance, or maybe even my stepdad. Not to mention the fact that Jim could be injured. I shuddered at the thought. God, I am going to need him when this baby comes. When I turned back around and looked at the woods again, the lights were closer. I couldn't deny it anymore. They were so much closer. They were only a short distance away, past a few dozen trees. That deep uneasiness inside of me was kicked up like mud at the bottom of a dirty lake, spreading through my body. It was dark. Too dark. I couldn't see anything except for the glint of those lights in the trees, in the space where the trunk ended and the branches and pine needles began. I didn't want to admit it, but they looked like eyes. Lights reflecting on a pair of eyes. Bev, can you help me with this? Jim's voice echoed in the night air, making me jump. I stared at the lights, contented myself that they weren't moving, not at that point, anyway, and then looked down at him. What's up? Jim was kneeling on the ground, trying to fit the spare tire over the large screws. I'm having a hard time with this. He nodded at the tire. I'll hold it up. I just need you to guide them into the right position. Okay? You can't do anything on your own, can you? I said, leaning down to help him. He rubbed my hair playfully. Shut up and help me. Together, we guided the tire into the right place, and I held it there as he tightened the nuts back onto the screws. Can we get out of here now? I asked. Just have to tighten these, he said, tapping the lug nuts. 5 more minutes, okay? Just 5 more minutes. I grimaced. I was dreading the sight that was awaiting me, the things that I would see when I stood up. Where would those lights be? Best case scenario, they had moved away, gotten smaller. I didn't feel confident in that possibility, though. Still, I straightened and stared into the woods. I remember that uneasiness inside of me shifted and morphed into something like terror, something sharp and distended poking out of me. Not only had the lights not moved away, they had gotten closer. The lights were right above us. They were in a tree next to the road, right next to our car. The pair of them were fixed on me. I can't tell you how I know that, but they were fixed on me. The lights were far away from the glow of the headlights, so I couldn't see much else, just those reflections in the darkness. I stood by our car, by Jimmy, and I stared up at them. I kept the vehicle between the lights and me as if it was some sort of protective barrier. It's odd to think that I was so scared, but Jimmy had no idea what was going on, and I didn't tell him. I didn't need him stressing out, or worse, investigating the lights, seeing what they were. I needed him to finish changing the tire so that we could get out of there. So I just stared and stared as if my attention would keep them away. As I looked into them, the lights seemed to grow. They pulled me in, a magnetism that was impossible to ignore. I felt myself go dizzy. The longer I looked at them, the more I realized that they were moving, side to side. It looked like they were tied together, attached to the same dark base. And all done. Jimmy's voice made me jump. I looked down. Jim lowered the jack back to the ground, the tire hitting the road, and he removed it from under our car, bringing the jack and the flat tire to the trunk. "Let's get out of here, please?" I shivered as I stared up at those lights in the trees. I didn't want to move to the passenger side, closer to where they were, but I had no choice. I moved quickly, slipping into the car and shutting the door, keeping my eyes on those lights the whole time. It took Jim longer than I would have liked. Eventually, he got into the driver's seat and the vehicle roared to life. In an instant, we were peeling away from that spot. The hum of the engine and the growing distance lowered my anxiety. Jim put his hand on my knee, keeping his eyes on the road. "Sorry about that, babe. You got us out of there." "Yeah," he said. Yeah, but it's not safe being on the side of the road like that." "It was 30 minutes, Jim." 30 minutes too long." As we got further away from the lights, I looked back. They were still there in that same tree next to the road, but now they were facing us. Now, I'll put it this way, they were looking at us. Headlights began to rise up from afar, an approaching car coming down the highway behind us. Those headlights flashed over the woods and the tree that was next to the road, the tree that the lights were coming from. And when they did, my heart dropped. For a single instant, for a fleeting moment, I saw something wrapped around the tree just below that pair of glinting lights. It was a long, gangly claw. And then it vanished. The claw and the lights moved back into the woods, disappearing into the shadow. I'm just glad we got out of there when we did.